What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into them lunar shenanigans? This week is a fascinating one because it starts off pretty active. We have the moon is going to be going through the series of squares as it moves through the that kind of tail end of Sagittarius and then moves into Capricorn with a square Venus and Saturn. That Saturn one's not as great. But as we get towards the end of the week, there's a lot of sextiles, a lot more easier aspects that are coming through. So there's these, I imagine them as little doorways that are opening for just for some more flow, for some more ease if there's been that tension that's been going on there. I definitely have some notes, some astrological notes to share once we get to the end of the video. It's been a week. Eclipse. That eclipse week was not joking around. But yeah, we'll get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do on this show, podcast, channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, which goes over the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, what happens to be going void of course, and just to get a feel of each of the transits as the moon is flowing through these different conversations with the other celestial bodies and how to best work with the aspects in the astrology that comes through in the mundane sense and then even in one's personal chart. So that's what we get into here on that one. Always good to think about that good old moon. Now, which the moon's been elusive here as of late. Now, if you want to support the work that I'm doing further, down in the description box, there's a link for my Patreon page, and I have 2 tiers on there. One of them will get you access to the Lucky Day podcast, which is a monthly show that talks about the most auspicious dates for each month for whatever endeavor that you're wanting to initiate. And then the second one will give you access to that plus a personalized monthly transit report from me. Who doesn't want that? But if that's something that you are interested in, all that information is down in the description box. But let's go ahead and get into this thing because I'm going to be covering the week of March 10th through the 16th, 2026. And let's go ahead and get into this. We're in the last quarter, towards the last quarter moon phase here. But before we get to that, on the 10th of March, the moon is waning here. And if you're watching the video version on YouTube, I have a chart, a picture of the chart here with the moon squaring Mercury, which is going to be the aspect that is going to be completing on this day. That's going to happen at about 13 degrees and 33 minutes. The moon's in Sagittarius and Mercury's in Pisces. When you think about this combination, Mercury representing the mind, the communication, there could be more chances for verbal conflicts that could be happening, for more misunderstandings, especially since Mercury is not in the best shape. And when you really break that down, it's in the sign of its fall and its detriment or its depression or exile when you think about that. So, and then on top of that, it's retrograde. Mercury's not been doing too hot, co-present with Mars. The only positive is that at least it's getting witnessed there by Big Papa. But this has been a very fascinating and kind of tricky time in retrograde period to sort of navigate. I've had some various things, mercurial things that have been happening, all sorts of construction that has been going on that's been redirecting my walking routes and all sorts of things. So those can be just very general moon square Mercury sorts of things that may show up. It could also be too, the squares are, if I didn't mention, they're when the celestial bodies are 90 degrees apart from one another, like the moon is with Mercury here. So it's typically between like modalities that you're seeing that. So the mutable placements here. And they're not just, they can be tense, they can be uncomfortable, but they stir up this action as well. They create these challenges for us to surmount. So this could even be where good for some good problem solving, anything that needs you to come at a problem and looking for some sort of solutions, especially mutable energy. What is something that I can change and adapt? What are some big ideas? That moon in Sagittarius even. That we're thinking about that moon that Mercury in Pisces can be very creative, very inventive, less analytical. So this could be very good for just getting the vision for something there, but again, very good kind of problem solving energy or something good in stirring the mind, doing some reading, or doing some artwork, or doing something that exercises maybe a different part of the brain, learning, practicing a language, something along those lines. I think it'd be a good thing for the moon squaring Mercury. Now, another thing to think about is that where that tension is happening, that Mercury's going to be slowing down here again soon, and it's going to be stationing direct in about 10 days, which we love that, but we are going to start feeling that slow down as well. So that would be something over this next week. I would pay attention to that. Jupiter's actually going to, if we're looking at the chart here, Jupiter's not direct yet, but Jupiter is going to be going direct later today. So that, oh, not today, but on the 10th, depending on when you're watching this. So that's going to be another one to watch out for. That I'd be curious to see what kind of news even comes up during this time, whether it be news in, not even just like in world news, but this could be news in your family, maybe news with friends, news with a partner, something along those, and maybe news in like your community, your city. Maybe there's some sort of change, some sort of expansion that's going to be happening, maybe some sort of relief. We're thinking about Big Papa now that it'll be able to do its thing regularly going forward in Cancer, minus the overcoming square from Saturn, which that's neither here nor there. But yeah, this is definitely a day to watch out for. And before the moon moves into where we get to the next day here, we get to the 11th of March. Because before the moon moves into Sagittarius, the moon's going to form a square with the sun. Now this is going to be where we're in the last quarter phase, and now we're getting closer to getting out of this eclipse cycle that we've been going through. When you think about the eclipses, especially like from that build up to the end period, that week before, usually that quarter between the sun and the moon, as it goes from the last quarter to the maybe the first solar eclipse that's happening, or maybe lunar eclipse, depending on what's going on, that's usually that build up time. And now we're starting to, especially getting towards this point, we're starting to get out of the tail end of that. I think personally that we'll really be out of it once we start off just brand fresh and get into a lunation, whether that be a new moon or a full moon, where the luminaries aren't blemished in some sort of way. But this is like we're at that last hump here. And this is a moon square the sun can be feeling a bit unsettled, where one doesn't feel, where that fire of the and light of the mind and the body, how the moon represents the body, the sun representing that light, are maybe feeling at odds with one another. There could be just some sort of dissonance that could be coming there again, like feeling a bit unsettled or feeling a bit uneasy in some sort of way. This could be where, thinking about the sun representing like authorities and things, maybe there's something going on with that, maybe with like a boss, or maybe on your end, maybe you happen to manage people, maybe there's some sort of unrest that could be, potentially some decisions. Maybe the sun's trying to go this way, and then the people aren't maybe quite vibing with that, or there's a bit of a pushback in some sort of way. Maybe you're wanting to make some sort of changes, or not, it doesn't have to just be you. Maybe there's some sort of change that's wanted to be done in like the household per se. Now it's trying to figure out how do we go about those things, and just applying it to the gravity of your situation. But these are usually, again, more squares where there's a bit of that. There's this frustration, this they're uncomfortable sometimes when we think about the squares. And it's like sitting in that frustration in a sense. And if I didn't mention that, the squares were meant to be martial in nature, thinking about the Mars frequency when we're coming through with that. So that could be, again, just a bit of a tricky time with the moon squaring the sun. And then when we get to about 9:07 p.m. Pacific time, the moon will move into Capricorn. Now, when we get a lay of the land here, this is one to look to see where you have Capricorn in your chart, because the moon's going to be navigating through this placements, especially if you have any cardinal placements. That's Cap, Aries, Cancer, or Libra. Any transits that are going through, any planet that's going through Capricorn, but especially when the moon's going through there, that's going to be activating those points more personally, because they're either forming conjunctions, squares, or oppositions with those placements. So that's one thing to consider. Think about what house or houses, depending on what house system that you use, that the moon's going to be traveling through. So, for example, with this chart here, if you happen to have Libra rising, maybe there's something that the moon is bringing up in the home space, something in the private life, something with your personal kind of like maybe religious beliefs or kind of spiritual beliefs, maybe something with the parents, maybe something again with the family, with your land, with your however that may be, however those fourth house themes may be showing up. That might be something where, especially with we're thinking about that tension maybe between that and like your seventh house with all that, with Saturn going through there, Venus going through there, especially if you have a night chart, might be a bit trickier. So just some things to kind of pay attention to there. Now, this is also not the greatest place for the moon to be, because when we look at the lay of the land here, the moon is in its detriment in Capricorn. So that just means it's in the furthest sign away from its home sign. So when you imagine a planet in its or celestial or like a celestial body in its detriment, that's just like if you were in a place completely opposite your own. You don't speak the language, you have no idea of your surroundings, don't know where anything is, don't know who these people are that are around you, your neighbor. You're all, it's hard to function like that when you don't feel properly resourced in a way that is completely opposite to your nature. Doesn't mean that the celestial body can't operate in any sort of way, but it just requires more effort for the moon to dig up its resources when it's in Capricorn, because now it's under the rulership of Saturn. And when you look at this, the moon's going to form, like I said, some easier aspects here with like Mars is going to form. The opposition with Jupiter is a bit of a mixed bag, but at least Jupiter's now direct, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But it is also too, first, before he does any of those things, it's going to have a harsh aspect with its domicile lord, Saturn. Now, and we could just go ahead and go into that one next, because this is going to be kind of the busiest day of the week as these energies are building up towards this time in Capricorn. Because on the 12th, when we get to the 12th of March, the moon will first, like I said, form a square with Saturn. And one thing that I think particularly makes this kind of tough, it's a bit of a mixed bag, because one thing that we like about this is that at least the moon is in Saturn's house of Capricorn. So typically even though we have this harsh aspects here, Saturn's not necessarily, it kind of alleviates some of that. There's this reception with the moon being in Saturn's house. So that's at least a bit of a mitigating factor. But one thing that's a bit kind of pushes it in the other direction too, kind of almost neutralizes or kind of cancels it out, is that, and this is something that I've been reading, and I think I've mentioned this in Firmicus Maternus's book, the Methesis. I've been reading that here, and there's a lot of this emphasis and seeing a lot of these themes about when the moon is either increasing in light or decreasing in light, and how that relationship with different planets, how that nuance changes the aspects of the planet. And this is where, when the moon is waning and is applying to these hard aspects with Saturn, these were looked at as even more particularly tough than as opposed to if the moon was waxing and applying to Saturn. And there's even some things with that as well. There's always going to be some sort of, it's always more nuanced than it is, but this could be a bit of a tougher one for the moon to be going through. Saturn's not in the best of shape when you think about it. The moon's already not doing too hot, and then its domicile lord, its landlord, isn't doing the greatest, being in the sign of its fall. The only plus that Saturn has going for it is that Venus is present with it, providing some ease with that. But moon squared Saturn could be this feeling of that, those constraints that Saturn can bring, the constant rejections that are happening, the feeling that's always that someone is under is controlling one's action, that you're never quite free. There's this melancholy that comes with Saturn, this hopelessness that can come with it, this laziness, why bother, why it gets into this almost maybe nihilistic sort of field with Saturn. Sickness can be another thing that speaking of that, I know you can hear it in my voice, the body's fighting off something. But even when you're talking about the malefics, as far as that could be another thing, that's maybe the moon representing the body. Maybe there's something that's coming through there's an illness, maybe there's a fatigue, maybe whatever that thing happens to be. With that moon squaring Venus, which will be the next aspect, it's like, how do we take care of oneself oneself, one's needs, one things in the constraints of that, to take just to feel some sort of sense of comfort that Venus is trying to bring. Venus represents those ideas of gifts, relationships, and things, and that could be hard to, let's say, for example, hang out with people if you're not feeling well. That could be something, but how there could be a balance, or maybe you know someone who's not been feeling well, then this could be something. I'm just throwing out a random example. Taking them some soup. Who doesn't love soup? At least that soup and that company. Maybe even offering some healing remedies, whatever that happens to look like. But Venus is also that idea of devotion, that sense of keeping things cleanly and pure. And there's a strong faith aspect with both of the benefics, but I don't think Venus's is one that gets touched on a lot. And I think that another thing that could happen with that square to Saturn with Venus is how to keep one's faith and how to keep devoted, how to find, how to be able to say, like, oh, if I just go hang out with some friends or do these things, that everything's gonna be fine. It's that, how do you keep in that regular practice? And this is where that moon sextile Mars, because my thing is that sure, we could just not do anything with Saturn, but then what is the point? I think that after a while, as you're kind of processing through whatever it is your situation is going through, I think that Mars comes through, hey, even though we may be feeling this, we got to keep moving. We have to keep growing. We can't necessarily stagnate, to try to put one foot in front of the other. And it's not saying that you have to show up greeting it with an optimism. It could just be with I just got to get this thing done so that I can just to try to keep some semblance of normalcy or sanity, or try to keep things from just kind of falling apart. It's not to say that we don't allow ourselves that space, and that's what Venus is about too. I think this is a very kind of complex sort of transit where it is acknowledging that we do have a lot of obligations, Saturn, a lot of things that we need to do, a lot of things that we want to do. And I think that moon sextiling Mars is and even with sextiling Mercury, it's that mind that I I know I have to take this action. In the mind is with Mercury, it's not maybe 100% on board with it being retrograde, but it does acknowledge that the alternative is going to be a lot worse than if I'm not doing anything. So it's that one's a very, very complex, and again, you have to see where this is happening in your chart, how this may be showing up there, but I think that there are, especially with it ending with that sextile to Mercury, because that's when the celestial bodies, if I didn't mention that, that's when they're 60 degrees apart from one another. So there's this like both Capricorn and Pisces being nocturnal signs, being more that idea of kind of more receptive signs. There's that harmony that's happening there, and the sextiles are an easier aspect to deal with. They're just ones that require more initiative to reap the benefits of them. But there can be that sense of reward with them as well for taking the action versus not. So that's just something I think to kind of ponder with this transit on the 12th. And then we get to the 13th of March, and we get to that moon forming an opposition with Jupiter. Now, the oppositions are where the celestial bodies are 180 degrees apart from one another, so in opposite signs, as we see Jupiter and the moon here. And one thing with this, and just even thinking about all those aspects that we were working with yesterday, on the 12th. The 13th gives this, okay, Jupiter's direct now. It's able to do its thing. It still hasn't quite moved yet. It's still like, it's not like that Jupiter's gone direct and it's just like, all right, Jupiter's just making it rain. Jupiter's got to wake up. It's got to start getting some motion again. It's that. But I think where that moon is opposite Jupiter, where that tension is, because oppositions are considered the hardest aspects in astrology. And so this could be where we're wanting that immediate relief. We're needing that. It's not even a question. It's like, Jupiter, what are you doing? And that could be where And as hard as that can be, sometimes we can be in situations where our hands are tied and we have to make do best with the things that we have available to us at that particular time. And I and I think, what's really kind of tough with this too, if you're looking at the chart, Mars and Mercury are actually getting ready to. They're within a degree of their conjunct of this series of conjunctions that they've been having over the last few months. And so this moon is having a hard time keeping the faith, maybe trusting in the that things are going to be better, that someone can bring some sense of justice that Jupiter promises, that can bring that relief from all bad things, that can there could be this real sort of it reminds me of this. I remember I had this sort of moment where I was in kind of a bit of a lower place in my journey, and I just remember just feeling this real kind of sense of just like being alone, and this idea of kind of remember just kind of looking up at the sky, and it's like, well, if you're not going to help me, well, then I guess I got it. And that's what it can feel like, that sense of like that you've been maybe betrayed by that, maybe that higher force, and when that faith is shaken like that, how does one continue to move knowing that? And as you see, even in that state, I still managed to move. It wasn't easy. It absolutely wasn't. That was a particularly hard time, but it is possible. And I think that it is, remember, with the moon sextiling the sun, that even in these low points in one's life, again, whatever that happens to look like, that there can still be a light, even if it looks just like a candle, even if it's just a little dot, a little laser pointer. There's still some sort of light in the darkness. It it can't just be all bad things all the time, because otherwise then Venus and Jupiter there would be no point in talking about those two. So I think is that idea, when you think about the benefics, Jupiter I remember in Vedi's Valence book, he was talking about how the ancients refer to the different colors of the celestial bodies. And I love for Jupiter, they refer to as brilliance. But when you take that brilliant color and you were to add, let's say, some black in it, even if it's just a drop, you see that, or some red in it, like the Martial, or that kind of Martial or Saturnian colors. It's blemished, it's sullied, it's never quite the same. And it's just like how to not let that ruin the otherwise abundance that Jupiter does have to offer. Because there are dark, there could be some hard times, but on the other end, like I said, I had even a pretty tricky, pretty hard week, I would say. And in that, I received a message from a friend that was sending me pictures of their little Pisces baby, because they would have just had a birthday, and their little Leo baby. And I was just like, Jupiter, children, representing that. There's still that happiness, that joy, remembering one's desire with Jupiter, I think, too. And then that moon sextiling the sun is trying to bring. Oh, and that's supposed. Oh no, I spelled that right. But it's that moon sextiling the sun is that trying to get back to equilibrium, that opportunity again, that takes some initiative, but we can get back to that sense of oneness again, not feel maybe dissociated from our environment, or from the present, or whatever that happens to be, from whatever, not even the present, but from our situations maybe that we're needing to deal with. So some things to just think about with on the 13th there. And then we get to the 14th here of March, and then the moon's going to move into Aquarius at about 8:13 a.m. Pacific time. And when we look at the lay of the land with Aquarius, this one's a bit more of a quieter one, because it goes out of the moon moves out of view for quite a bit of the celestial bodies. It's only being witnessed by Saturn and by Venus, which this is a nicer one. It's different than when the moon was being witnessed from Capricorn. This now Saturn's seeing the moon from a more sympathetic state with that sextile there. And so we were just kind of real talking about some pretty heavy things starting off that week, but now this sextile I would say with Saturn, gives this feeling of looking at those long term things, looking at the time, and having that discipline, having that stamina, that being austere, maybe having to be a bit more frugal. Let's say if this is something maybe with finances or something with the home, finding ways to be resourceful, working with that little, but that Saturn depression maybe feeling more manageable, ways of taking care of that, looking into ways of getting in the ways to take care of the body as one can, even if it's just doing maybe some meditation, just sitting there and just kind of taking in one's surrounding as well as one can, being with your family, your friends, your pets, whatever that happens to look like, your community. But when you think about just something with the Aquarius too, just thinking about this, now we've gone from Cap, and now we're looking at what house or houses do we have Aquarius in. That moon's going to be more activating that. So if you happen to have like an Aries rising, the moon's going to move into your 11th house. So maybe some things come up with like friends or groups or things that may affect the other, especially the other fixed placements in your chart. That's going to be This would be Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. Those ones, if you happen to have a lot of those placements, you want to pay attention to that time. I'm not a big fan of Aquarius. I mean, when planets are going through there, because it's opposing all of my Leo placements. So opposing my Leo placements, applying to my conjunct my Saturn, square my midheaven, my chart's lit up. So, and I don't want any more light right now. I'm good. But yeah, this can be just a chance with that. Let me make sure. Yeah, let me make sure I cover everything. Looking at that house, yeah. But yeah, overall, this one is a bit of an easier transit that the moon is going through here, because when let's get to the next day here, because on the 15th of March the moon is going to form a sextile with Venus, which is really nice. It's a harmonious aspect with one of the benefics. We like that. Again, can be a chance to, if you need some kind of help, I think an easy one with the moon sextile Venus is to try to find those people, your allies, your comrades, those acquaintances, those friends, anyone that can help you get any sort of resources that you may need for whatever situation. But an opportunity to just like reach out to someone, to take care of oneself. I always think of Moon Venus transits as very nurturing, very very sweet. And even when if you've ever seen Venus and the moon in the sky together, that's a really beautiful sight. There's something really special about those two being together. And I mean, of course there is, because they're both of the same sect too. Venus is a part of the night sect, which is the moon sect. So Venus and the moon have this relationship here to, like, two heads are better than one. That sort of feel, that idea of that you have, that's again that sense of community, that sense of someone that can help bring in some sort of laughter, can bring in some loveliness, some more Venusian energy, whatever that is. That could be buying something for oneself, whatever that happens, or buying someone a gift, something along those lines. It'd be a really nice way of kind of working with this Venus, that kind of Venus sextile there. So for whatever, maybe that Saturn thing, what may have brought up with that sextile. So, because sometimes I think with the sextiles too, even just to go back to Saturn for a moment, sometimes it can be hard to think about those long-term things when you're under that heaviness. But when you have those good days, when the things feel a little bit lighter, that can be the chance to get out of that rut, to move things in a different direction before they become something that gets more settled in, and be something that becomes more habitual, and becomes something that gets harder to work out of one's routine, if that's something that you tend to be prone to. So that's just something to, I think when we're navigating the moon sextiling Venus. And then this last transit here, on the 16th of March, the moon is going to finish up its time in Aquarius, and then it's going to move into Pisces at about 4:15 p.m. Pacific time. And when we look at the lay of the land here, the moon's going to have some tougher conversations. We're just coming off of that Mars Mercury conjunction that's happening, so the moon's going to talk with Mercury on that one, kind of get a feel for that. It's going to form that conjunction with Mars, which is going to be some trickiness, and then but it's going to end before we get to the new moon that's going to be happening in Pisces. At least it's going to end on a good note with Big Papa. That's going to talk to Jupiter on direct. So it's trying to. It almost seems like we're trying to have some sort of positive ending. If not a positive ending, a positive, because we're never quite ending. It's all cycles and circles. So it can give this idea of a promise for the cycle to move in a different direction. That's what this, just looking over this, and we'll dive into that more as we get into next week's video, but and get into that new moon. But just, we're almost there. We're almost out of this lunar month. Again, this was kind of a wild one to navigate, but look at the Pisces portions before I switch over. Look at the Pisces portions of your chart. What house or houses do you have Pisces in your chart? That's going to be something to navigate, especially if you have a lot of mutable placements. That's going to be Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius. That moon may be in any celestial body going through those that Pisces person is going to be working more personally with you. And yeah, let's go ahead and switch back over. But yeah, that is pretty much the week, pretty much this week here. So as you see, it was a lot, I think, kind of building up, or it's like the final kind of crescendo of this whole piece. We're reaching that end of this whole eclipse stuff that have been transpiring over this last 4 weeks. So, and this is one to kind of sit with that and think about how things have changed. And of course, like a lot has changed globally. That has been going on for sure. That there's no question. But how that's even trickled down into your personal stuff. Because sometimes I think those kind of larger mundane things can make it almost put your life in that perspective. And there may be, not everyone is going through the same experience. Like I said, like I had a pretty challenging week, but I had other people. It always varies with that, and so just thinking about how this works on a personal level, on a familial level, on a friend level, all of those things I think can help one navigate through these times and feel a bit more like they're not just being dragged to and fro, but having more of an active participation in it, if you will. So, but yeah, that's the lunar shenanigans. So I would love to hear how this week has been for you. Because let me go ahead and tell you, because this week has been. So it was really fascinating. So let me know if you were able to see the eclipse. If you were, I don't know if you're able to share pictures down in the comment sections, but if you are, do that. Do that, because I didn't get to see it. Cloudy over here. I was pissed. I got up at like 3 a.m. 3 a.m. Stood out there for about 15-20 minutes, and it's just like, all right, let's go back to bed. So that didn't happen. But the crazy thing was, right after the eclipse, like Mars had entered into Pisces. I have the moon at 0 degrees of Gemini, and like we know, the moon represents the body, one of the things that the moon can represent. And right as Mars is still within that 0 degree range of Pisces, still squaring my moon, just starting to separate by about 40 minutes or so. On that Tuesday, I was doing a workout, and I lifted too heavy, and I pulled something in my back, and that took me out for a few days. And then in the meantime, as I'm healing in that regard and trying not to go crazy, not moving as like I normally do, then the body's trying to fight off some kind of cold too. And I was like, what the hell? So this was something where it's like you'll have some aspects that'll happen. You're just like, oh, what is that going to look like? It's going to be a bit of a harder one, but how could that be? In the eighth house, I have a Leo rising, so I'm gonna go back to that chart here real quick. I have a Leo rising. And thankfully, I don't have anything else in mutable placements. Thankfully, it's just the moon. Like I got it, it's out early, out of the way. But it's going through my eighth house, and one of the themes for the eighth house that it could represent in when you think about it in Hellenistic terms was sickness, was things that can come up with that. And then the moon rules my house of like dangers and the 12th house, which deals with like dangers, sicknesses, illness, injuries, things like that. So it's just like lovely. It's a very literal literal thing that was going on here. So yeah, that's been my week trying to navigate that and get back into the swing of this stuff, because yeah, it was a bit of a, but it got me where I was sitting down and where I was got a bit more reading done, so that was kind of nice. And yeah, just kind of helped me just sort of slow down a bit, just kind of be with myself. To it even taught me a different appreciation for, as someone in my chart, I have a lot of planets in the first house, so body is something that's very very prevalent in my life. And it even helping me relate with the body differently, how I feel in it, from when it's in pain to when it's healing to when it's fighting off something. And that's even a new way that I've been relating to it, is not the body getting sick, is that something martial or something Saturnian, maybe kind of in this instance Martial. Saturn maybe a little bit later, maybe a little later in the month. I'm looking out for that. It's going to square my sun. So, but that's it. Even helped me to just be embodied in a different way, and like how I need to take care of myself by making different teas and herbs and doing different steams and just getting enough rest, just those sort of basic things, and how that can be very helpful. So, and how you can pass those remedies along, those things you learn from those challenging points don't have to be just something that happened. They can be tools for you to help someone else navigate those periods of time, different tricks, techniques, resources, things like that, to make their just a bit more easier, to provide that sextile opportunity there. So yeah, yeah, that's been my week. So yeah, let me know down in the comment section. Hopefully you've had a better one than I did. Let me know how things have been going for you, how these planets have been moving, you've been transiting through your houses, how you've been seeing those themes show up there. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that. If you want to book a consultation with me down and see how these maybe more showing more personally with you, how these transits and things affect your chart, down in the description box, there's a link to book a consultation with me. And then if you have any questions, my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. And then there's a couple of playlists for the Celestial News Monthly if you want to see how the rest of March is going to be looking, the latter half of March. I'll probably be having the April video out. I'm going to be recording that one here soon. I may try to do it tomorrow when I'm recording this. It's on what day is it? The 8th. So, yeah, I may be recording that one here. I'll be recording it here shortly and having that released out towards the end of the month. But that's all the monthly videos that I have for in that tab. And I have a tab for the Lunar Shenanigans. And then there's some videos which I had planned on doing some more of these, but again, I had been body had other ideas, or the planets had other other intentions for me. But I have these videos that have different celestial bodies in different zodiac signs in different houses, and how to navigate that as you're looking at your own birth chart. So definitely check that out. And if there's one that I haven't done, feel free to comment in any of the videos, and I put them all. I just put a queue of ones that of requests, and then just kind of go down the list and release them as I get to them. So yeah, that's all available for you there. But until next time, stay mindful out there. You keep eyes on that good old moon while we're getting ready to get to where we can't see her soon. So we're getting ready to appreciate this a little bit more light before we get to that new moon. Then we'll be able to see her again soon. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.